In James Gunn's Superman, the titular hero refers at least once to Krypto as a quote-unquote bad boy.
Help us out! Bad boy! Bad boy! Bad boy!
But Krypto isn't really a bad dog or a bad boy. He's just an undisciplined and untrained one. Krypto was not necessarily born a restless, rambunctious, and chaotic force. He may be predisposed to destructive behavior, such as making Lex Luthor a human chew toy, but Krypto is more likely a product of his upbringing and genetics than of his inherited traits alone. In other words, Krypto's rampant misbehavior most likely results from a mix of his deep-seated genetics and the boundaries which have, or have not, been set around certain behaviors.
Stop it! Stop! Sit! Stay!
The tensions between nature and nurture which reside within Krypto are also reflected within James Gunn's version of Superman. From the movie's start to finish, Krypto bites and chews his way through all obstacles with abandon. In contrast, Superman approaches at least some conflict with a degree of restraint, such as when he tries to give the kaiju attacking Metropolis a humane death. The same cannot be said for the members of the Justice Gang. In this way, Krypto acts as a foil to Superman. Krypto and his unchanging misbehavior reinforce Superman's character arc and growth over the course of the film. Before discussing Clark Kent's development and Krypto's lack thereof, it is necessary to consider how Krypto in the movie departs from his classic counterpart in the comics. In traditional Superman lore, Krypto is Kal-El's household pet when he is a toddler. However, the two are separated when Jor-El, Kal-El's father, sends Krypto into space in a prototype for the ship he plans to use to send Kal-El to Earth. When Krypton is destroyed by the explosion of the planet's core, Jor-El launches his son into space with a direct trajectory to Earth. Kal-El's spacecraft lands on Earth straight from Krypton, but Krypto's ship wanders space for a decade before reaching the same destination. Much time has passed once Superman and Krypto are reunited. Kal-El is no longer a boy, but a fledgling Superman who embodies truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. Superman takes on Krypto as his sidekick, and the pair fight crime as a formidable duo who share similar powers and abilities. Throughout his career as Superman's sidekick, Krypto demonstrates fierce loyalty and courage on several occasions. Krypto most prominently demonstrates these traits when he defends Lois and Clark from intergalactic warlord Mongol, and when he makes the ultimate sacrifice of his life while fighting Kryptonite Man. When Superman was weakened by Kryptonite Man's natural abilities, Krypto bit out his throat to neutralize the threat and protect his owner. In the process, Krypto was exposed to radiation, which ultimately killed him. Krypto lost his life saving his owner and fulfilling his responsibilities as Superman's best friend. The Krypto of the comics is not the Krypto of James Gunn's Superman. Krypto of the comics is noble, brave, and capable. Krypto of the 2025 Superman is rash, impulsive, and unthinking. However, James Gunn's Krypto exhibits unruly behavior not just for the sake of comic relief, but to further emphasize the movie's theme of nature versus nurture as applicable to Krypto and Superman. Krypto was born with the genetic potential for super strength, super speed, supervision, flight, and accelerated healing. It is in Krypto's nature for these exceptional abilities to be activated and heightened when under a yellow sun. It is not in Krypto's nature to use these abilities for such frequently destructive ends. As the saying goes, there are no bad dogs, only bad owners. A recent scientific study confirms this idea, as it was found that, quote, owner temperament may have a modulatory effect on a dog's social and cognitive behavior depending on the dog breed group. In simpler terms, the study suggests that an owner's personality can have some influence on a dog's personality, though this idea is more true for some dog breeds over others. How does all of this apply to Krypto? Well, Krypto's upbringing by Kara, one based in a lack of boundaries or order, can be interpreted as the most direct cause for his uncontrolled behavior. When Kara comes to the Fortress of Solitude to retrieve Krypto, she lets him tackle her and repeatedly smash her head into the ground, without so much as a stern word or glance. If Krypto had been raised by a different owner, perhaps Superman himself, he would likely demonstrate more restraint and purpose in his actions. Krypto reflects Kara to the extent that he exhibits many undisciplined behaviors that she has tolerated or left wholly unchecked. Superman's balance of nature versus nurture follows a similar pattern to Krypto's. Superman also possesses powerful abilities which enable him to fly, shoot laser beams out of his eyes, and perform several other feats impossible for the mere mortal. Like Krypto, it is in his nature for these exceptional abilities to be activated and heightened when Superman is under a yellow sun. It is not necessarily in Superman's genetic, predetermined nature to direct his energies toward productive or well-intentioned ends. As established at the start of the movie, Superman leads his life based upon his biological parents' final, though incomplete, message. Besides this recording of his biological parents, Superman is also a product of his adoptive parents and their influence. Jonathan and Martha Kent have directly taught him humility and integrity in a way that the projection of Jor-El and Lara did not. If Superman had been raised under different circumstances, it is possible that he would have emerged into adulthood as a man, quote-unquote, super in his abilities, but not in the sense of a personal or moral code. This point is reinforced when Lex Luthor breaks into the Fortress of Solitude and has his engineer restore the original transcript from Kal-El's parents. In the comics, Kal-El's parents sent him from Krypton with a general optimism for their son's future. In Gunn's version, Kal-El's parents sent him to Earth not to save the planet and its inhabitants, but to lord over them. In this way, James Gunn gestures toward what could have been if Kal-El had been raised under slightly different circumstances. He might have been more akin to a Homelander or a Brightburn than some embodiment of manly virtue. Whereas the comics establish Superman's heroic persona as something of a given, James Gunn adds a layer of uncertainty to the goodness of Superman's character. If the entirety of Jor-El and Lara's message had been saved, perhaps Superman would have dispatched of anyone unwilling or unable to serve him, taken many wives, and
Rule without mercy.
all of this is to say that Krypto in James Gunn's Superman isn't really a bad dog at his core. He is a product of his environment. Similarly, Superman isn't a quote-unquote good guy or bad guy by nature. He too is a product of his environment. Superman is clearly susceptible to the influence of external forces, given that his life direction has been largely guided by his parents' hologram. As Superman grapples with the implication of his parents' message, he finds himself back at his childhood home on the Kent's farm. Pa does not state outright that Clark would never have become the ruthless tyrant his parents envisioned if he had seen their undamaged recording from a young age. Instead, Pa conveys to Superman that such a future would not necessarily be a destiny or fate for him. Pa remarks to Clark,
Parents aren't for telling their children who they're supposed to be.
He adds that your choices, your actions, that's what makes you who you are. Pa instills in Superman the optimism that he can rise above or reject the expectations of his biological parents and even those of his adoptive ones. What distinguishes Superman from Krypto the Superdog is that Superman is able to rise above his circumstances and biology and choose his own path. Yes, Clark Kent reflects the influences of his biological and adoptive parents. However, it is after his conversation with Pa that he empowers himself to be more than a mere reflection or product of his environment. Clark chooses in this moment to embrace his identity as Superman, to act as the type of trustworthy, upright, and virtuous man he wants to be, and not just because he has been raised to demonstrate those attributes. Superman himself articulates this idea during his final confrontation with Lex Luthor. Superman describes his understanding of his own humanity. Quote, I am human as anyone. I love, I get scared.
I wake up every morning and despite not knowing what to do, I put one foot in front of the other and I try to make the best choices I can. I screw up all the time. But that is being human. I hope, for the sake of the world, you understand that it's yours too.
In all fairness, Superman cannot truly appreciate the weight of human mortality given his supernatural abilities. He does not feel the same sense of helplessness or terror as humans do when they watch a building crash in slow motion towards them. However, Superman highlights the core attribute of human beings, which he does reflect: the ability to choose to be better than our natures, to mess up and try again. What makes Superman a man is the fact that he, like the rest of humanity, can choose to act differently than his nature or heritage might suggest. He can choose to use his powers in a different way than his parents intended. To relate all of this discussion about Superman back to Krypto, Krypto is portrayed as an unruly, misbehaving companion from the start to the end of the movie for two reasons. The first is to highlight the alternate, more destructive versions of Superman that could have existed. The second is to highlight, in contrast to Krypto and his lack of conscious choice, Superman's decision to reject the supremacist designs of his parents and aspire to be something different, something better. As for Krypto and other pets, while they don't have quite the same ability to forge their own paths and rise above their natures, they can still make for man's, or Superman's, best friend. I couldn't find a good place to include this information in the analysis portion of the video, but the real-life inspiration behind the movie version of Krypto actually reinforces the same themes of nature versus nurture. In a recent interview, James Gunn confirmed that Krypto was based on his real-life rescue dog Ozu. Ozu served as the physical model for Krypto and was a direct influence on Krypto's personality. Gunn adopted Ozu around the same time as when he began work on his Superman film. In a 2024 Instagram post, Gunn shared that Ozu came from a hoarding situation in a backyard with 60 other dogs and never knew human beings. He was problematic to say the least. He immediately came in and destroyed our home, our shoes, our furniture. He even ate my laptop. It took a long time before he would even let us touch him. In a later interview with People magazine, Gunn explained that when he first adopted Ozu, his newfound pet was a product of his former environment and, therefore, a quote, terrible, uncontrollable dog. As Gunn continued working on the Superman script, he recalls asking himself, quote, what if Ozu had powers? We'd be screwed. And thus, the filmic Krypto was born, end quote. Fortunately, Ozu has found a stable and loving owner in Gunn, just as Krypto found one in Superman. It remains to be seen how Krypto's misbehavior unfolds as his dynamic with Supergirl is explored in her upcoming movie. Thanks for watching. What did you think of Krypto being portrayed as a quote-unquote bad dog? Let me know in the comments below. And lastly, like and subscribe for more videos, and I will catch you in the next one.